Now that you understand what a web server does, let's have a quick tour of one of the web servers I mentioned in the previous clip. I'll use Internet Information Server because I have a Windows demo environment here, and I've enabled the web server role on this server. I don't expect that you'll be deploying your website directly onto a Windows IIS server that you control. We're going to look at web hosting providers in the next clip, where you pay them to do all the administration for you. But you don't have as much visibility into the server in those situations, so I wanted to set a baseline here in this clip. The name of this server is Web1, and it's on the exampleorg.com network, which is just the name I gave to the Active Directory network in my local demo environment. I have a network file share mapped with the source files for this website. These are the files that you'll find in the course downloads. We're just going to do a simple copy and paste deployment onto this web server. So I'll copy these files from the network. The root of the IIS web server for deploying sites is on the C drive by default in the inetpub www root subfolder. Now we can create subfolders and map those onto websites, or actually map any physical folder to be published as a website in IIS. But there's a default root site created when you install IIS, and the files for that site are located here. So we're just going to replace those files with our website files. Now let's open up IIS Manager, which is software that gets installed on this web server to allow you to manage this web server. There's a hierarchy of items in the left pane, starting with the ability to manage the server itself. You can see there are a lot of options here, and you don't need to know any of this really to deploy a website. These are features for the server administrator. Under the server node, there's a collection of websites. There's only one created, and that gets created when you install IIS. This is the entity that gets published to the network, and you can create many of these on the web server. This represents a root website and can contain many subsites. You can also create many of these root websites on the same web server. If I right-click on the default website and go to Manage Website and Advanced Settings, you can see the physical path is set to the www root folder that we just placed the website files into. Let's close out of this now and go to the Content view. It still shows the old files, so let's refresh this. And here are the files that we copied to the web server. Let's go back to Features view, and I just want to show you that you can manage authentication from here. If I were to enable Windows authentication, then the web server would pick up my Windows Logon ID automatically, and I could use that within code on the website if I was using a framework like ASP.NET. I can also require that this site be accessed using HTTPS, using the SSL setting, which would then ensure that traffic between the client's browser and this website would be encrypted. We don't have a certificate installed and an HTTPS endpoint configured on this server, though, so we can't do that. Let's open up a browser and let's navigate to the name of this web server, which is web1.exampleorg.com. And this is also the root of the web server where the default website is published. That brings us to the website that's been deployed to the IIS server and is being accessed with this HTTP request. We can navigate around the website, and you can see that the pages change in the address bar when we do. Now let's get the IP address of this server and see what happens when we navigate to that instead. I'll open up a command prompt and type in ipconfig, which gives us the IP address of this server on the network. It's 10.240.10.33. So let's go back to the browser and replace the server name with that IP address. And the page refreshes and we get brought to the same site again. So the domain name of the server is just a pointer to the IP address, and there's a DNS server configured within my dev environment that helps the browser resolve the two. Let's try adding a port number onto the IP address. Let's use port 443, which is the HTTPS port. It says the site can't be reached, and that's because we don't have SSL configured for this site. It's the same if I type HTTPS and then the domain name of the website. I get the same error because HTTPS resolves to port 443 on the web server. Let's change this back to HTTP, and we get brought into the website. So that's how a website is deployed onto an IIS server. Even if you're a developer within your organization, you probably don't have access to production web servers to do this, although you might be able to do it in a dev environment. In this module, you gained an understanding of how websites are hosted and accessed on the World Wide Web, and how HTTP builds on the hardware and protocols of the internet to make that happen. You also learned about web servers and got a tour of a web server to see how files can be deployed when you have access to log into the physical or virtual machine itself. In the next module, we're going to look at hosting with a web hosting provider, which is a company that manages the web server for you, so you can just focus on designing and developing your website.